Hey, how you doing? It is I, the Terrific Lady, otherwise known as Brandy, and welcome to Retro Horror School and happy Friday. I hope that you all have a great weekend with great stuff planned. Me, I'm probably just going to be laying in bed to trying to rest up my back. I don't know what I did to my back. It's in severe pain, so that's how I'm going to be spending my weekend. It's his own little horror show, but hopefully you have a much better weekend planned than me. But enough of that. On today's video, violence, especially violence in horror films, whether you feel that it is necessary in horror movies or whether you feel that it is overused. Violence is a tool that is used in many horror films and a very multifaceted tool at that. There is more going on beneath the surface whenever violence is used in a horror film. It could do things like create a sense of tension and fear and even explore societal taboos. So in today's video, we're going to talk about violence in horror films, how it's used, and give some examples. So here we go. Violence can be used as a way to explore fear and tension in horror films. Graphic depictions of violence, for example, such as gruesome murders, can definitely shock and unsettle audiences. And it keeps them on the edge of their seat, and it just lends to the overall tense, frightening atmosphere of a horror film. And this is an example I use all the time, but take the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, for example. Directed by Tobe Hooper, this horror film, which can now be called by some iconic, uses this kind of violence to create that atmosphere of just tension and dread. The murders that are committed by Leatherface and the Sawyer family are almost just like we don't understand why. They just do it. And these murders and this violence instills that sense of dread and tension that just underlies the entire film. Because of that, that is one of the many reasons why Texas Chainsaw Massacre has left a mark on and a lasting impact on people. The roughness and the grittiness, especially of the violence. So in this kind of instance, violence in horror is meant to shock, but violence in horror can just go beyond using it for shock value. Violence can serve as a bit of a vehicle to explore certain themes and subtexts. Filmmakers can use violence to delve into certain issues such as power dynamics, trauma, revenge, and certain aspects of human nature, the darker aspects, to be more specific. And by using violence in this way, it can get people to go, and to think about what the underlying message is and what the violence is trying to portray. In Silence of the Lambs, which is directed by Jonathan Demme, the violence in this movie is tangled with themes of power dynamics and psychological manipulation, more specifically between Hannibal Lecter and Clarice Starling. There's a bit of psychological warfare going on between Hannibal and Clarice, and a lot of manipulation. And this violence underscores the film's exploration of what is the true nature of evil. There is violence in the film, but it's not 100% at the forefront. It is more of a complement. Also, when it comes to violence in horror films, directors need to balance that need to shock and provoke. Some choose to do and use violence in a more subtle way. Others are more in your face about it. It just depends on the horror film, the story, and how the violence is used. Jordan Peele's Get Out, for instance, uses violence to explore underlying themes of racial tension and social anxiety. The film blends horror, satire, and this mixture really resonated with a lot of people. reflecting societal concerns and also sparking a lot of conversation and debate. So in this film, Jordan Peele didn't use all out gory violence because that would have taken away from the message that he was trying to portray in his film. Whereas in any kind of A-slasher, there's just blood, guts, gore, and most of them you're there to watch it and have fun. So the violence in those kinds of movies is very well placed. Whether it's through social commentary, atmosphere, story, or the kind of special effects used, horror has always been known for challenging society's norms and pushing the boundaries. And it's often done through extreme depictions of violence. And some horror films not only step up to that line of what is considered socially acceptable, they cross that line. And they do this to provoke strong reactions and challenge expectations. Take Saw, that's directed by James Wan, for example. This movie introduced audiences to a whole new kind of killer known as the Jigsaw Killer and his sadistic games. And for the time, it pushed the boundaries of graphic violence in mainstream movies. It had really kind of shocking imagery and themes that could be considered morally ambiguous, but it challenged audience expectations of the time. And then other movies with similar kind of gory, violent themes followed in its wake. So the portrayal of violence in horror can have a significant impact on how the movie itself is received. Some people who watch a movie may really like all the violence and the gore, and others may just find it a little bit too gratuitous, too disturbing, and too much for their tastes. Hostel, which is directed by Eli Roth, its portrayal of graphic violence definitely divided audiences of the time. Some praised it for its just out there in your face kind of tension and thrills, but others criticized it as being a gratuitous depiction of torture and gore. So this sparked, and could still spark, interesting debates and discussions that reflect the relationship between violence in movies and how an audience receives it. And another way that boundaries have been pushed in horror through violence is the use of practical effects and CGI. It revolutionized the way that violence and violent acts can be depicted on screen. Now, I talk about this movie way too much, and y'all are probably going to get sick of me talking about it, or you may not, who knows. It's John Carpenter's The Thing. It had groundbreaking practical effects led by the legendary special effects master Rob Bottin, to where there's so many amazing creature transformations, and pretty gruesome deaths. So this film set a new standard for realism and immersion in horror. And this movie is still counted by many as one of the greatest horror movies of all time because of that. And last but not least, the portrayal of violence in horror is definitely influenced by cultural and societal context. Horror holds that mirror up to society and comments on culture and society. And this kind of commentary can depict the particular way that violence is portrayed. In The Exorcist, directed by William Friedkin, the film graphically depicted violence and sacrilege. And it sparked great controversy and cultural debate about how people do not need to be seeing this movie because of the way that it depicts religion, and it is blasphemy. And it definitely challenged society norms and pushed the boundaries, again, stepped up to that line, and pushed the boundaries of what was considered acceptable in movies and especially horror movies. So that was a little bit of a dive into violence in horror films and a little bit of exploration on how it was used. How do you feel about how violence is used in horror films? Do you feel that it is a necessary tool, or do you think that horror films could do just as well without violence? Let me know in the comments below. And sadly, class is dismissed, everybody, but I will see you next time. Bye.